First of all, happy 4th. I am excited to be here with you on the 4th of July. This 4th of July has seemed particularly fraught, particularly in the sense of it being right at the wake of the rescission of the Roe v. Wade decision of 1973. It also comes hard on the heels of Juneteenth 2022. I want to talk about this, and I also want to give you a preview of two things that I'm going to be premiering tonight. Doing my best to get my lighting right here. Here we go. Doing my best. Two articles, both from The Atlantic, that I'm going to share with you tonight with my commentary. The first one is a truth that needs to be remembered and internalized. The second one is a bald-faced lie by a white man that people still believe, and that is still considered truth. And we're going to look at the implications for both of these stories. One, which is true, but was largely heralded as false, which is the celebration and the freedom and the heroism of African American soldiers during the Civil War and directly after that, including Reconstruction, and the second article, which is a long form, and you need to read the whole thing. And if you're going to say that you stand with black and brown people, you can read for 10 minutes, because it's going to take more than that. This is practice. But in any case, it is the story of a young man who, in 1959, created the 50-star flag in anticipation of Alaska and Hawaii becoming states. There is a whole story that has been treated as truth. It has been verified by Wikipedia, verified by Snopes. Respected historians have verified it, and it turns out that it was false, 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 false. You'll read all about the story about how President Eisenhower was involved, about what that meant for him, and the idea of young people and people in general hearing this story for literally the last 60-something years when it was false, but not hearing anything about the other story. That's long but shorter, and I want you to read both. So read both. I managed. Read both. That speaks to Black participation in the 4th of July. How, particularly after the Civil War, the 4th of July, at least south of the Mason-Dixon line, was actually taken over by newly freed slaves, and how white Southern traders bemoaned Black celebration of the 4th of July. And then, of course, post-Reconstruction, when white Southern traders to their country took it back forcefully. And by the way, before you set yourself above and apart, I don't have any relatives south of the Mason-Dixon, then we can also talk about the fact that Union soldiers are on records as wanting the Black newly freed slaves dead. Look, y'all. If we are going to talk about American history, we need to be able to talk about American history in a global way. We need to be able to have unblinking eyes, and we need to be able to not just tell the pieces, parts of the story, sometimes to the point of out-and-out fiction that makes white people look good, but to be able to tell the entire story. One of the reasons, not the only reasons by any means, but one of the reasons that white people and white supremacy is the fact that the narrative has gone for centuries that Black people have not contributed anything to the nation. Sometimes it's conceded that we're cannon fodder, and there are a few people that white people allow us to know about, like the guy that plotted out Washington, D.C., like Phyllis Wheatley, like Frederick Douglass. But for the most part, we've just been sort of, if you're generous about it, passive victims, or if you're not so generous about it, feckless people that have sucked on the generous tit of the United States, particularly after we were given our freedom. This is so important as we go deeper into the series on emancipation and Juneteenth, when we start talking about moral agency. That also includes being included in a national story in ways that are truthful and ways that reinforce the fact that not only have we always been here. I mean, who knows? I could be a daughter of the American Revolution. Oh wait, you won't know. Because if I was around that time, my ancestors were slaves, and they're not recorded in the DAR. When we look at how much of our shared national history is absolutely dependent on false narrative that aggrandizes white people, and equally false narrative that demonizes and relegates to the sidelines black people, this is a big fat deal, particularly on the 4th of July. That my father is a military hero is not up for question. But what about his father, and his father before him, and his father before him? We have South Carolina roots, and one of the stories in the article you're going to see that I'm going to drop for you from The Atlantic was talking about how of all the July 4th celebrations post-emancipation, the biggest, the best, the most exciting one was in Charleston, South Carolina, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger until white people took it back and pushed it out of the city limits, and then pretty much outlawed it altogether post-Reconstruction. And also the very disturbing but true story of how the collective amnesia that everybody colluded in, including Union soldiers, where Union soldiers and Confederate soldiers buried the hatchet down south. No mention of slavery, no mention of pre-Reconstruction. Took back the politics, took back the narrative, took back the social import. And so now what is considered conventional wisdom, that black people have not been active contributors to the American story, still holds sway. And that is why there should be a gentle but real pushback to the idea that the 4th was never for us, not originally, but we took it back and we put new meaning on it. And like so many things that did not necessarily have its origins in West African culture, we took it and transcended it. Have you ever had spaghetti made by a black woman? You should. Yeah, you should. It's different. It's wonderful. That is the story. Taking things and concepts and freedoms that were never meant for us and making them our own. Regardless of whether or not we ever got credit for it or if the credit was wrested back. Now let's pivot a bit to the lie story that has had traction since 1959, 1960, of a white man in Ohio who in high school cobbled together a 50-state flag and then gave it to his congressman, and then got a phone call after he graduated high school from Dwight D. Eisenhower himself, who invited him to the White House, where for the first time, this was in 1960 after Hawaii became a state, lifted the flag up the flagpole, and he, this little 18 or 19-year-old kid with Eisenhower on one side and his congressman on the other, saluting proudly as his contribution, his lasting contribution to American history, was codified and solidified. It's false! It's all a lie! But it is a lie that makes so much difference. Because I want you to think about this. When you think about great milestones in American history, both the big ones in terms of strategy on the battlefield, both in terms of the little ones, he was actually called an American Betsy Ross, which turned out to be truer than you might think. Why? Because Betsy Ross is a myth too. No mention of her in the historical record. But there is mention of this young man. And he ate dinner off of that for decades. It's time to remove the myths, both in terms of a grandiose idea and subsequent supremacy of white people contributing more to the American tapestry, in this case literally because it was a flag, to the American tapestry than they actually did, and black people who have been bludgeoned with the false narrative that we ourselves, both individually and collectively, have contributed nothing. That is why white people still think that the Fourth may not really belong to us, even with historical documentation. That is why it is absolutely appropriate for us to celebrate the Fourth. I am thinking, in a way, about symbolic plates on symbolic tables, where you have different things on the plate that mean different things. In my mind, it's not a perfect analogy, it's not a perfect illustration, but I'm thinking about the Passover Seder plate. The bitter and the sweet. The history and the now. And the not yet. And the not yet. So I'm going to be dropping those two for you. The one about the truth and the one about the lie. Read them both. Be convicted by both. I refuse to say a vapid, meaningless, superficial, Happy Independence Day. I want you to have a meaningful one. I want you to have a meaningful Independence Day. I just had my 4th of July burger, chicken burger, just in case anybody from physical therapy is watching. And now I need to write 2 more essays and put them on top of the 2 articles. One that rights a wrong where black people have been lied on, and I do mean lied on, for over 150 years. And the other one where we tell the truth about a lie that burnished and aggrandized and supported the supremacy of white people since before I was born, since 4 years before I was born. Read them both. Comment on them both. Earn your hot dog. I appreciate you all. Let's keep watching.